Joining me now is Vladimir Kara-Murza, an opposition politician and friend of Boris Nemtsov. Is this terrible murder a turning point, as the former Prime Minister Mikhail Kazyanov told the rally? Are changes inevitable, and if so, what?
Good evening, Kathy. First of all, I'd like to say that Boris Nemtsov was one of the most decent, honourable and principled political leader in Russia. It's a rare thing in politics for somebody to keep their principles and never to betray their ideals and their friends. He was like that, and he dedicated his life. And in the end, he gave his life for a more free, a more hopeful, democratic European Russia, which he will not live to see, but which will absolutely happen. And when it does happen, his role in that will be a large one. I agree absolutely that whoever the actual killers were, and I do hope that despite the experiences of the last years, I still hope against hope that his killers will be identified and brought to justice. But I think there's no doubt that the principal culprits are the people in the current political leadership in Russia, in the Kremlin regime, that have been stoking this atmosphere of hatred, of intimidation, of intolerance, especially during the last year after the beginning of the war with Ukraine, when those who opposed Putin's policies, political opponents like Boris Nemtsov, were denounced as traitors, as the fifth column.
Okay. Well, of course, Vladimir Putin has described the killing as a provocation, indeed saying that the opposition killed him to blacken Vladimir Putin's name. No matter how fanciful you find that suggestion, the fact is that most Russians believe him, don't they?
Well, first of all, I think it's difficult to talk about what the people actually think and believe when we have total propaganda 24/7 on every single national television channel. And unfortunately, it is the truth, and you mentioned it in your report earlier, that in Putin's Russia, in order for an opposition leader to be mentioned in a positive light on television, he has to be killed first. And this is what happened. Just today, the 1st of March, one of the nationwide TV channels, NTV, was supposed to broadcast another slanderous so-called documentary about how the opposition leaders, including first and foremost Boris Nemtsov, are in the pay of the West, they're traitors to Russia, all this usual slander and lies that we've been hearing about the opposition. This program was supposed to be on air today, and he was killed on Friday night. At least they had the sense to pull it off the air, but I'm not sure they won't show it at some later date.
Well, in those circumstances, clearly fear is everywhere. When you see those placards saying, "I am not afraid," do you believe that, or are opponents of Vladimir Putin very afraid?
No, we are not afraid, and when we saw tens of thousands of people marching through central Moscow today, indeed many bore those placards that you mentioned. Many bore Russian flags, portraits of Boris, and I think we owe it to his memory not to be afraid. We do not have right to sit silently, in our homes, in our kitchens. We do not have a right to leave the country, to run away. This is our country. We have to stand up for it. We have to stand up to those, to this KGB dictatorship that has been in power in our country for the last 15 years. And
well,
if anything, we owe it to Boris's memory to carry on the fight and to win.
Well, how do you win? How do you get the country behind you then?
Well, if you look at history, European history, including Russian history, it's always an active minority of citizens that drives changes forward. Just as happened, in Russia in 1991, when the communist regime fell within 3 days, as hundreds of thousands of people went to the streets of Moscow, as we saw more recently in other Eastern European capitals and in other post-Soviet capitals, when large numbers of citizens come out to the streets to protest against dictatorships fall. And I have no doubt that Putin's dictatorship will fall as well.
Vladimir Kara-Murza, thank you very much for joining me.